that explains the numbers.
So this, as an industrial product, is our second one that we're working on right now that will have certainly some differentiation in terms of programming.
That also brings us to a question of how to look at these parcels of land. Alfredo just mentioned before prime real estate. Interestingly enough, we're not speaking about some suburban poor developments. Those parts of the city, many times on top of little rivers that come down from the mountain ridge in New York, in Caracas. So they're right in the middle of the city, separating maybe one of those 5 municipalities that I have mentioned earlier. So a piece of land like that has an enormous value if you look at it just as from a developer's viewpoint. The policy at the moment in Caracas or in Venezuela is, let's say, out of a promotion. And in that case, we don't even differentiate between opposition and the oficialismo, which is the official party system, which is in power at the moment. They are practically involved in a race to hand out land titles. Those land titles are obviously very much welcomed as the final state of securing the investment that people have done maybe over more than 50 years now. However, one should recall that what is the most interesting situation that anybody would find in any city, a piece of continuous property. As I said, each of these squares here has 500 meters. I think it would be very hard to find anywhere in Rotterdam a piece of land that size. That would be maybe a post-industrial coal mine or something that you could find anywhere, which is now surrounded by urbanizations. That means at the moment you break that parcel of land up in about 6,500 mini parcels of land, where many of them don't even have an access road, with the promise that they can go with this title to a bank and get a credit for the house to develop it and maybe upgrade it, will be quickly broken at the moment you enter a bank branch and explain where you really are.
You might, I mean, some of you might want to read Hernando de Soto, the Peruvian economist, quite brilliant book on the mystery of capital. He talks about this, land titles and monetizing that land titles. And we actually, in Venezuela, because of the topography and the way these things are built, maybe Mexico City, it would be easier to turn them into a more regular, formal urbanizations. We are actually looking at the idea of a co-op. And the
within this co-op, we see this parcel of land actually as one building. We're not talking about a flat hill. Because of the map, it's still flat. You know, people always look at the property as in a two-dimensional way. Just to illustrate it, if you flip it up, you could say you have a mega skyscraper consisting out of units.
So these are macro parcelas that we call them, major parcels of land. And we're experimenting now. We're just going to suggest it. Hopefully, one day it could be the topic of maybe a studio in the future of how we could deal with these. And as you know, the co-op model in New York City, for instance, the vertical co-op is based on your apartment floor is not owned by you, but rather you own shares in a common building.
That responds also much more to the history, how those urbanizations came into existence. So we're just trying out, those are like different projects we worked on. Here you see some of those parcels of land.
This is the land tenure. So she's happy because la tierra es de quien la habita. The land is who inhabits it.
However, we believe that this pulverization of those mega parcels are actually destroying value. They would have something much more interesting in their hands to be the co-owner of the biggest parcel of land in the entire city. So here, just that you also see a little bit how those urbanizations come about.
And they sell the terraces, so there really is a system.
This is a developer concept you have to keep in mind, and that's not a joke. So to become a developer in Caracas, you need 2 men and 2 shovels, that's it. You just go out and you start, and you will find clients, that's the market, and you sell them. That also leads to problems, as you see here in the back, erosion. Part of this, those problems are also responsibilities that you might have right here in Holland, because the first world, which is in many ways criticizing these developments and say, how can they do this without knowing the consequences? They're counting, obviously, going into the third world for cheap labor, very lax environmental laws, etc., using the workforce in maquillas, how they call them, like montage plants, etc., and around such places, such urbanizations come up.
So how do we work this entire city, this informal city? What strategies? And this is, we're going to run you through one way that we've devised at looking at what areas our projects will be located and what areas we're going to provoke as architects to create some social change. So this is the Central Valley footprint. These are the green spaces, open spaces.
This looks now very simplistic, but we want to try to give you some access into something that is here presented in a very abstract way, how you can intervene in this maze of a city.
These are the riverbeds, highways coming in, as you see, the barrios, the 5 municipalities, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are the areas in which we have identified potential projects. And this is this, let's say this brown zone is the zone of friction in which most of our projects are located, which is the overlay of these areas of highway, riverbed, etc., etc.
Much to the amusement of the Lord Mayor, we suggested to found a 6th municipality. The number 6 doesn't mean much to you if you don't live in Caracas.
Or borough, 6th borough.
But everybody in Caracas knows that there are 5 boroughs. So if you talk about a 6th one, everybody gets very much alert and says, the 6th borough, where is that? So as the 5 city mayors in their offices operate with maps that only show their particular area, almost like an island in a sea of nothing, where you have a piece of a river, a chunk of a highway, or access to the national park in the north, we suggested that in the zones, in the overlay zones between the river, most importantly, because that's one of the elements that connects through the city everything. That's one of our critiques also. How can you be in charge of 500 meters of a river that just cuts at the corner of your municipality? So how does this work? The reality is nobody's in charge of it. Those things normally are kept aside. The other reality is that normally those municipalities, they turn their back on each other. So the closer you come to the periphery of them, the less investment is done. And this is exactly the zones where you find those inner city informal settlements on top of the rivers, underneath the highways, etc.
So let's say this brown line could be the glue and the structure. So what actually was the divider of the city should actually re-knit it back together.
So this is just like, let's say, an abstract way of representing this in-between zone. And this is another way how you could also see it, because those barriers are just those areas in between two of those particular municipalities.
So these particular are the projects we're going to look at today quickly. Children's shelter under a highway, an inner city airport and train station, the vertical gym, which we just went over, the stair system, and a pedestrian bridge between two municipalities, and the St. Mary's Anglican Church Center.
And the dry latrine.
Dry latrine, sorry.
Okay, I'll go really quick over that. This one.
These are two ways to see development in the barrios. One, urban acupuncture. Let's revitalize certain areas. Let's look at some new strategies. Or the Cornavi plan government is let's open a road throughout the hill.
So we thought instead of opening a road, which would have affected a whole series, more than 160 houses, we said maybe people don't need a road because people who live there, they don't have a car. And in a situation as the city is, super congested, infrastructures overstretched, rather than putting a second highway level on the existing highways, what they have done in Mexico City,